He escaped the proximity of the prison and quickly decided to attempt to head north towards Italy, instead of towards the seemingly illogical destination of Greece. He picked his direction and started shuffling away in his concrete shoes. He went in the wrong direction. He saw a sign that clearly stated how far it was to Greece, and then another that had a smaller number next to it after he had traveled quite a distance. He tried not to cry with an "I've gone the wrong way." He had to double back after getting his bearings. He was confronted in the days immediately after his escape by two uniformed men with a gun who told him to stop so they could check him. Prisoners of war and other inmates in the former Yugoslavia were often let loose in their prison gear, so people could hunt them down and apprehend them for something to do, with prizes awarded each time one got caught. Usually provided the prisoner was weak and feeble. The chasers used to think it was entertaining to watch them try to take the opportunity to get away for good, as if it were weird fun. They assumed he was another one released for a fun hunt. They asked him to stop. Kaiser Adolf refused to stop and kept going, so they threatened to shoot him. He told them he was not stopping and kept moving. They shot him twice, once through the buttock, and one bullet that lodged in his back. When they approached him, they thought he was going to fall into their arms between their shoulders to be carried away back to wherever he was released from. When they moved to grab him, he suddenly grabbed them by the side of the heads by the hair, and smashed their heads together with a solid cracking noise, knocking them both unconscious. One was left bleeding from the side of the head. He then took a deep wounded breath, raised his head in the air, and yelled freedom in German in a long, drawn-out, loud, screaming wounded moan. Which he later said was the most embarrassing thing he ever did in his life. After finally busting the leg shackle open, where he accidentally caused himself a deep stab wound, and managing to remove the one around his arm, he shuffled ran, walked, and traveled over 1,000 kilometers to northern Italy, through loony Yugoslavia. The main issue on the way was nighttime spotlights used to illuminate things. Operated by night shift workers, they were waved around like lighthouse Batman beams, up and down the streets in set patterns. The operators would follow the set patterns, and when finished with a run, would return them all to the starting point, and point them at it. Sometimes a Yugoslavian flag on a flagpole, lit from every direction they were using them. Trying to time the final beaming at the flag so that all spotlights returned to the flag at once, as if it was ballet or something. He studied them quietly, noted the pattern and moved to stay out of the beams. It was bizarrely easy given the routine. After the encounter that resulted in his bullet wounds, he evaded all snipers, checkpoints, police, military, spotlights, barbed wire, alarm sirens, guards, etc. He entered what is now Slovenia, and then walked across the Italian border without being intercepted. He was exhausted and had lost a lot of blood. His feet had blistered inside his concrete shoes, but he could not find a way to get them off. He ended up seeing a dim light like buildings in the distance. It was a country convent like a basic castle outside a very small town in northeastern Italy, run by minor organized crime. He got their attention. The door was opened by a female looking like a mother superior of some type, with a candle. She looked like a cross between the paintings Weeping Woman and Mona Lisa. He told her he was wounded and could he get some help. She gave him a seat inside the outer door and went to get the priest. He was told to fuck off by a man who looked like a priest, as he was too smelly. The priest closed the inner door and leant up against saying, "Oh, no. Oh, no." The nun said, "What?" He said, "That's Adolf Hitler, what is he doing here?" "Oh, no." She said, "Who?" Adolf banged on the door asking to be let in as he was wounded and needed help. He had a protracted argument through the door where he said he would have to walk somewhere else, and asked to be let in saying he was wounded. He ended up banging on the door repeatedly, bashing it with the side of his fist, letting the pounding do the talking, whilst the priest moaned about who it was at the door and how he got there, telling him to fuck off repeatedly. Kaiser Adolf yelled that he had blisters on his feet and had been shot in the back and buttocks and was losing blood. Then returned to banging on the door forcefully saying, "Let me in." They agreed to let him in and sit on a block of stone just inside the main door. He told them he was Kaiser Adolf Hitler, the Hohenzollern of Germany. He'd been a prisoner, he didn't know how many years exactly, in Yugoslavia, and could they please help him and get the authorities so he could speak to them. The nun, possibly the Mother Superior, decided to get the convent camera out after the priest had disappeared further into the building. Nearly every convent in Italy had one, and the residents of each one liked to practice every now and then. The excuse for the cameras was just in case a statue started crying or something, as a joke. When she returned with the camera, she gave him a piece of slightly gooey and pleasantly smelling cheese, with something with it that smelled like parmesan. He sat down to wait on the concrete block, leaving blood on it from his wounds, and decided to slowly take a small nibble out of something he had not eaten in nearly 16 years, after the smell of it had gotten in his nostrils. Whilst he was prisoner, he had been fed nothing but the main course from the dinner he was abducted at. Slow-cooked Rubik's Cube-like beefsteak meatloaf on request, at least 3 times a day, 3 green vegetables, and scalloped potatoes per meal. The people who prepared it claimed they were going to charge him $1 million a steak whilst he was prisoner of war. An attempt to torture him into playing along with their inbred baby extortion terrorism plan. The nun set up the camera and took a photo of him just as his eyes rolled back in his head due to the taste of the cheese hitting his tongue. When he sat down in the convent in Italy in 1959, he was still wearing the clothes he was wearing to dinner in December 1943, including the remains of his top hat and overcoat. His clothes hand-repaired multiple times with whatever he could find. His shoes had been taken off whilst he was unconscious in 1943 or 1944, and concrete molded around them, or used as molds to make concrete versions, and he had concrete shoes on his feet that he could not remove. He had a broken shackle for a chain to pass through around his leg above the knee, was injured where he removed an arm shackle, had a deep small 1 centimeter wide stab wound down to the bone on one leg. His right leg was more blood than material, mainly due to the bullet wounds to his back and buttocks, and he had several other injuries. The scars from those bullet wounds were obvious to me the day I was born, when he held me up against his chest in 1972. He had travelled, mostly on foot, in the concrete shoes, around the distance from Kosovo to the convent just inside the Italian northeast border. He was photographed several times whilst he was in the convent, including after he took his first shower in nearly 16 years. The concrete shoes had to be smashed off. They took a photograph of him standing up, in a borrowed priest's smock, with a bag of personal belongings dangling from his hand, that contained his sealed dye matrix, that was on his clothes, when he was abducted in December 1943, and the gun Joe had shot himself with, and a few bits and pieces. It ended up being used on the cover of the Guns N' Roses' Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 releases, without anyone really knowing it was him in the convent in 1959 in the photograph. There is a glimpse of the gruesome state of his feet in the image. He had to talk the convent residents through what they could do to help him. Like they were total morons. Anything about helping him with his wounds got a distracted stare. He had to explain to a male in the convent how to mix iodine with other substance and dilute it so it could be used as a disinfectant. The blank distracted moron followed his instructions and collected what he said was required. Whilst he was explaining why iodine had to be mixed and diluted, the moron suddenly tried to pour raw iodine on an open wound on his leg, whilst he was talking to see what happened. Kaiser Adolf reacted with a reflex short jab punch at the vial he was tipping over to stop extremely painful raw iodine getting in an open wound. He accidentally got the person holding the vial a glancing blow on the jaw on the way through. They decided to call the police and make an assault complaint. Whilst they were waiting and claiming to try to help him with the rest of his wounds, particularly his feet, there were other incidents. At one point a convent resident appeared to try to sever the balls of his feet with a razor, as if helping him with his wounds. They took a quick, badly executed swipe at one, and muttered they had to come off. It was later established when interviewing them that they tried to do it to adjust his upright standing position to look more like crazy fake physicist Albert Einstein, who always stood with a backward lean. The police arrived and took him to the police station to lay assault charges. He was interviewed and said that he was Kaiser Adolf Hitler, the Hohenzollern of Germany. He'd been a prisoner for 13, he didn't know how many years. His date of birth was the 20th of April, 1889, and could they please get the authorities so he could speak to them? They instead proceeded towards charging him with assault, and laid a preliminary charge, with paperwork. They took statements from the convent residents about the incident, and decided it was self-defense on his part to stop the moron pouring raw iodine on an open wound, and the glancing blow to the jaw was accidental, and dropped the charge. It was fully recorded in Italian police records, and is the only record of any criminal charge being laid against him in his entire life. The 20th of April, 1889 to the 20th of April, 1982. It still appears as the only record with any hint of criminal activity about him on modern technology-based criminal record searches. It transferred to digital records when computers took over. The authorities took him in for questioning, based on his claim to be Kaiser Adolf Hitler, the Hohenzollern, listed as missing since December 1943. Some people had been pretending a female found dead in a bunker in Berlin in mid-1945 made over by a film production crew to look like him, including authentic costume, was him dead instead on television, since it had become commercially available to the public after World War II. He didn't know what a television was at the time. He had seen Sadie Einstein sitting in front of a box that caused her face to be lit up with flickering light, without any sound involved. But he had never seen the front of it, or heard any audio.